One of the really important things that you need to keep in mind about Charleston is it wasn't just a muse in the form of the surroundings and the house itself. It was the people who gravitated there, the brilliant minds. There was this buzz of activity and creativity. And amongst the most distinguished of the visitors was Maynard Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, the great economist, who was so embedded in the family. In fact, he was a lover of Duncan Grant for a while. He had his own room in the house. I mean, it's difficult to overstate the influence of Maynard Keynes as an economist. His innovations and progressive thinking has an impact even today in the 21st century. But what is so great about this picture is how Duncan Grant has managed to capture, as so often they were able to do with the friends who come to the house, the act of industry, the act of thought. John Maynard Keynes's face is in rapt attention to what he's writing, and I'll come to that in a moment. Around him, in that sort of fragmentary, cubist way, Duncan Grant has almost amplified the thought process that's going on in this great man's mind. It's almost as if all of his ideas and thoughts have become airborne. So in a sense, this is a really good example of how modernism allowed you to say so much more, although it is, of course, in the garden at Charleston, which was a lovely setting. Again, it's that lovely way in which the house is working. You know, it's like a sort of forever moving stage set. Although we can't be absolutely sure, it's quite likely that he was writing a message, a telegram to the Americans asking for funding to help us during the First World War. Ironic, given that this was a pacifist household. That was how Charleston came about in the first place, as a way to avoid conscription for Duncan and his then boyfriend, Bunny. It's worth noting that a few years later, Maynard Keynes arrived at Charleston with a genuine work by Cézanne. The road was so muddy and bumpy, he had to leave it next to a hedge, and they all ran out and brought it back. But, you know, it's just yet another indication of what a thrilling melting pot Charleston was. This is such an important painting, I think, a document. It's on loan, actually, from Charleston House itself, from the Charleston Trust. But it brings together so many of the really significant things that were happening at Charleston. It's there in the garden. You know, it's one of those fascinating people who were part of their lives. It uses the tools of modernism in a really effective way. And as a final thought, which is so typical in a way of what was going on in Charleston and with the Bloomsbury Group, what is he doing? He is writing something of extraordinary consequence, something that could change the path of history. And it's happening in the garden at Charleston.